Hey, Hal here. I want to talk a little bit about our partnership with OnX Hunt. I've been using it for a while now, and if anybody knows me, they know I'm not a very techie person, but the OnX app is it's a real time saver. I remember the days when we poured over topo maps everywhere we was going to go and stuff, and I don't do that quite as much anymore. Where it's really helped me is scouting, whether it's deer scouting, a moose, or even turkey hunting in the spring, which I do. It really helps out. I don't have to spend as much time running around the truck burning up the gas. I'm just basically using my OnX. Got it on my phone. Don't even carry a GPS anymore. So I just download the areas where I'm going to be hunting, whether it's up north moose hunting, and I use it mostly on the satellite imagery. I like to see the cuts and the clearings and the turkey hunting, the hidden fields and stuff. But everybody's using it now, from the game wardens to land surveyors, and just a great tool. And with our partnership with OnX, if you use a code BWB, you're going to receive 20% off on your first premium or elite memberships. And you just go to onxmaps.com/hunt. You'll be glad you did. Good luck on the trail.
This is the Big Woods Bucks podcast. Come explore the big woods and timber in North America with your host, Maine master guide and deer tracking expert Hal Blood. Listen to Hal and co-host Joe Cruzy as they unlock the secrets to big woods whitetails. Each episode will provide valuable insights in the tried and true system Hal has used for the last 40 years to scout, locate, and hunt mature big woods bucks. Listen and laugh as the crew discusses Hal's legendary adventures and learn how to apply a lifetime's worth of lessons from the big woods to your own hunting and outdoor adventures.
Welcome to the Big Woods Bucks podcast. I'm your host, Hal Blood. Sitting here this morning with me is Good Lee Shands and Joe Cruzy, co-host. And our special guest today is Ron Spomer from southeast Idaho. We're going to be talking everything hunting and guns, I guess. Right, Ron?
Boy, if you want to, I'm more than up for it.
Yeah, sounds good. Because we're getting into that hunting seasons here now. We just talked about our bear season just started, and right after that, we're coming into moose seasons and then deer season. So it's full on here.
Yep.
Yeah. I was telling the guys when I came in this morning, there's a roadkill bear just down the road here, and I've never seen a roadkill bear around here before. Yeah. That was the first. So
yeah.
Did you put your tag on it?
It was a cub, and there wasn't a whole lot left.
Oh, okay.
I just drug it off the road and went on. But yeah, there's plenty of bears obviously here, but you just don't see that many of them riding.
Maine's pretty thick.
Yeah, we got the thick woods here, and they get, they've been hunted forever, and they get baited and stuff, and they're shy of people. It's not like, and it ain't like you're likely to see one out wandering like in some of the open country you have here. It's this time of year before the leaves get off. It's pretty thick woods.
Yeah. I can imagine. I mean, we're so open out here. You'll have them in a stringer, we call them, of woods of some kind, brush or trees. There'll be a string of it, and then there'll be big open grassy slopes.
Yeah.
Especially on the south-facing slopes where the sun really beats down on it. And they'll get out in there and forage, and you can spot them from hundreds and hundreds of yards away.
Yeah.
Hey, Ron, if you could, I think most people that are into hunting and shooting know who you are. I've read your stuff, but maybe if you could just do a quick bio on yourself for any of our listeners that aren't familiar with you yet.
Oh, sure. I just have been a writer for magazines like Sporting Classics, Sports Afield, American Hunter. Gosh, I've been in well over 100 publications of different stripes over the years. Started way back in 1976 when I sold my first stories. And then I worked for fish and game agencies for a few years, about 5 total, and then went full-time freelancing. And I've been doing it ever since. And that eventually morphed into doing some TV shows and then got into the YouTube stuff. And that seemed to really resonate with people. So my wife and I have been just doing this YouTube thing. We also do a podcast. So we have Ron Spomer Outdoors on YouTube, in which we review rifles and we discuss cartridges and bullets and compare them. We'll do some active things out in the field like that. And then people have a lot of questions. So we started another channel, which was the podcast channel. And there I mainly answer questions from people about the other ones. And that goes over pretty darn well. I think we've got about 90,000 subscribers on that one. The other one has getting close to 500,000. In fact, we're mounting a little campaign now to get those last few subscribers so we can claim 500,000. And I don't know if you guys know the YouTubes, they have this little plaque. When you get 100,000 subscribers, they send you this little plaque put on the wall, but they don't give you another one until you hit 1 million.
Oh, it's 1 million.
That's not fair to all the people who joined up. So when we got 200,000, I shot a 20 caliber hole through the thing to celebrate our 200,000s. And then when 300,000 came around, well, we had to take a 30-06 to shoot a hole in it.
Yeah.
And then we had a 40 caliber for that one. So now we're going to shoot a 50 caliber hole in it.
Nice. We got the 100,000 one, so maybe with those subscribers we can help put you over the top if there's some of our listeners that don't watch it yet. So hopefully we can help out.
Your honor.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good. So Lee here is our team walking encyclopedia about firearms and all things. So he's probably going to have the most interaction with you than the rest of us. We're just hunters, you know. Well, Joe does a lot with it, but Lee
No, I'm nothing. I'm not even close to where Lee is.
Lee's the encyclopedia.
I've been reading your stuff for years, Ron, and especially in sporting classics and sports afield. And one of the things I wanted to know, because I guess I've really never paid much attention, but your photography, do you do all your own photography? Because the pictures that you put in those 2 magazines are just crazy good.
Oh, appreciate that. Yeah, I got into photography way back when. The whole idea as a hunter, of course, is to interact with wildlife. You guys know this. You just want to be out doing something in the woods. And because the hunting season is only a couple of months long, 3-4 months at most, what else can you do? Well, you can hunt with a camera. So when I was about 19 years old, I thought, gosh, that sounds like a fun way to extend my hunting season. I'll just get a big telephoto lens and a camera and figure it all out, which was an expensive education because I bought the wrong stuff and I wasted a lot of film, you know, but I taught myself how to photograph. And of course, because I was so crazy to be out there, it gave me a lot of opportunity to practice and pick up some good photography. And then you meet other folks who are doing the same thing and you trade notes and you gradually learn as you go along. And I guess a little bit of it is just a natural eye for composition. You know, some people just have an eye for putting things in the right place so that it really looks attractive. Home decorators, people would do their yards up, and others are just fairly boring. So if you have kind of a natural eye for what makes a photo balance, and then you start to notice the light and what it does to the subjects, it makes them jump or look more dramatic and all those things. You just start learning that and piling it up and working more and more, and that helps sell the articles. When I got investigating, because I decided to do this line of work when I was in high school already. Had an English teacher who said, you know, you write these themes and essays for class really well, and you're always reading outdoor life and sports afield in class. So maybe you ought to go write for them. And I said, write for them? Yeah, the people get paid for those stories. Well, that was an eye-opener. They get paid.
Yeah.
That planted the seed. So when I went off to college, I thought I got to try that. So that's what I did. I picked up the camera and I started writing, and they told me that if you can provide the photos to go along with that, with your writing for the complete article, the editors love that because it lightens their workload. They just get your package in and they say, well, here's the story and here are the illustrations we need for that story. Sold. So worked out nicely.
Yeah, I collect old magazines, and if you look at the old magazines, it's hard to get stuff before World War II because most of them were destroyed in the paper drives. But most of the magazines from the 40s and 50s, even the guys that were good writers, boy, they had some god awful pictures. You're like, I can't even believe that they put that in a national magazine. You know, it's all fuzzy and it's just bad.
Yeah,
It's come a long way.
Oh, yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, and to your writing, Ron, I was talking to Lee this morning when he came up and reading your, going through your website, and your About page is really, really good. That it's written very well, and I encourage anyone who hasn't read it to just go on there and read those few paragraphs, because you really did a great job of capturing the essence of what guys like us are about and why we do it, and the drive we have to hunt. And it just really struck me when I read it. And your writing style, your good writing style, is evident in it.
Oh, thank you, Joe. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I hope I captured just what you said. Why we hunters have this romantic relationship, I guess, with nature. What drives us, that inner thing that we really have a hard time articulating. It's always challenging, but I think every hunter I've bumped into, if they're given a chance to express it, they recognize it. It's like, yeah, that's what it is. It's just, I can't help myself. I just think about deer all the time, or I just dream about being out in the open grasslands, walking up pheasants or sharp-tailed grouse or something, and smelling the wood smoke through the woods at the end of the day, and watching the autumn leaves waft off the trees and litter the trail. And I don't know, it's just inherent in us, I think. I always say it's the atavistic urge going back to our caveman days. We need to escape reality to get back to the real reality, which is where we were created, I believe.
Yeah. Well said. Well said.
Yeah, our mission statement here at Big Woods Bucks is we old school guys, and we want to get people to learn some woodsmanship skills. And technology is a wonderful thing in its place, but we want guys to be able to go out in the woods and, be able to survive in the woods and know how to use a compass and rely on their skills. I'm Facebook friends with Tank Hoover, writes for the magazines, and he posted something after the Olympics, and it really resonated with me. It was the guy from Turkey, the old school guy that, showed up in his jeans and T-shirt with his hand in his pocket and ended up with the silver medal. I think people look at that and realize that skill will more than compensate for technology and all the other stuff that goes with it.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's the thing it's difficult to sell. I think the reason that our industry is so full of toys and gadgets and technology is because so many hunters or new hunters these days don't grow up rural the way I did, and I would assume you guys did. You're close to the country, so it just seems like you absorb that woodsmanship. You learn to make a fire early, you learn to read the wind, and all the things that go into this. I call it the Daniel Boone syndrome, where you're one with the environment, the same as any wild animal. You don't have to have gadgets for a coyote to make a living. He knows how to do what he needs to do. I mean, he's got his feet and his muscles and his teeth and his eyes, similar to what we do, and then he uses what he's got to get his dinner. Well, we need a little more technology than that, but I don't think we need all the electronic gadgets we have now in order to both be successful and have a really satisfying experience when we do it. So I'm with you. I think it's just so important for modern hunters to work to get that primitive skill. And you almost have to try now, because they want to sell you a thermal for finding your deer once you shot it. You don't learn to track. You get this thermal device, and you can read a thermal signature with it and all that. Yeah, those are great, and they're fun toys and all. But do you really develop yourself as a hunter? And you got to think, here I am in the 21st century, probably more knowledge available to us than ever before in history, and I can't function as well in the woods as some primitive from 500 years ago.
Yeah, for me, that boils down to, for me, is what I've always said is it's the same what you're getting at. But I just think a lot of it is the newer hunters, and even some of the ones that have been around a while, they're always looking for the easiest way to do something instead of working at it. It's the next little gadget that'll make it easy. Like you said, a thermal sensor. Well, that makes it a lot easier than trying to track one, right?
Yes, exactly.
But you can't replace a tracking skill. You know what I mean? To finding wounded game or whatever. There's no substitute for that. Looking for a drop of blood wiped on the back of a leaf when it goes through the brush. People will never learn that if they don't do it. So it's up to us to really teach those people.
And it's like anything else. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ron.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's human nature to want the easy path. Actually, I think it's animal nature. The way wolves and deer, pretty much any animal, if they can find a path through the woods, they walk the path. Rather than bust through the brush and step over limbs, they'll take an established path, a trail. Up in Alaska in winter, the wolves will run the railroad tracks or the highway that's been plowed because it's a lot easier than going through the snow. I think that's what drives our search for another tool that makes it easier for us. But what we're forgetting when we do that is why we're there in the first place. Why did you go hunting? If you just want to get your meat the easiest way, go to the store and buy your meat. You don't even have to go out and get cold and wet.
Yeah.
So they're just missing the point is like you are out there to develop your skills as a natural and effective predator, not use somebody else's tool that they invented and you merely knew how to use it.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to anything you do in life. If it's earned as opposed to easy, it's always better.
Well, yeah.
And
Yeah, exactly. Right.
I think that's I don't know how familiar you are with the style of hunting up here that we do, which is the tracking, but it goes with that. I mean, I think one of the big reasons that people track is because it's harder than sitting in a tree stand. I mean, it just there's skill involved with setting your tree stand and everything, of course, but the actual tracking a deer is always going to be more difficult than waiting for one.
Another really good.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Ron.
Go ahead.
Another
Well, I
really
just
good.
agree with you. It's absolutely right. But it's more satisfying, I think. You track that buck down for 2 or 3 days, and you finally get him. That's going to be a lot more satisfying than picking a stump on the side of the trail and one happens to walk by and you get lucky. Yeah, we all enjoy that, and I'll take it myself. But boy, if I can find a track, identify it as most likely a buck and a big one, and then follow him for as long as it takes and finally get him, what a satisfying feeling that must be.
Another really good example that we have in Maine, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but all three of us are old enough to remember when you couldn't hunt moose in Maine. They closed the season in 1935, and then they didn't reopen it until 1980. So for 45 years, they weren't hunted. So when they first started giving out permits, because our moose are so big, everybody wanted to get one, close to the road. So basically, when moose hunting first started, people just drove logging roads and shot those moose. They jumped out of their truck and loaded their gun and shot the moose. But now they've been hunted for 42 years or 44, I should say. We all, as outfitters, we've all trained our guides how to call moose, because it happens at least the first one and quite often the second one. It happens during the rut. So we train our guides how to call moose, but then we also, art that was kind of lost in Maine is people weren't skinning and quartering and packing out their animals. We always dragged them to the road or got them close to the road. But since the moose hunt has evolved and the moose they've been hunted so long now that you don't shoot them close to the road, there's a lot of quartering and packing, which is something that a woodsman should know.
Yeah, you got to have a little strength to pull that off too. There's a lot of meat on a moose, boy. I have helped pack out quite a few of them up in British Columbia and Alaska. And once you've got a moose on the ground, you're sort of faced with breaking down a Suburban.
Yeah.
It's a job for sure.
Yeah.
So, speaking of Alaska, and the moose hunting, and some of the reading I was doing, I know you're kind of fond of moose as well. And I saw that you hunted Kamachka for bear. but
Oh, Kamchatka.
Kamchatka, is that how it is? Kamat, yeah,
Kamchatka.
Russia.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so, do you have any plans to ever go back to go over there for moose?
No, given the world's political situation right now, I wouldn't be too eager to go to Russia again. I've been over there 3 times and had wonderful time. The people were just absolutely wonderful over there, very welcoming, and we got along just great. Hunters are hunters, I think, wherever you are. You've got that in common, and if that's what you're doing and not discussing politics, it works out pretty darn well. But yeah, they've got a lot of potential in that country for good wildlife management and hunting. But yeah, given the situation right now, I'm not too eager to go rushing over there.
How long ago were you over there?
Oh gosh, that's got to be a good 10 to 14 years ago, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like one of those. To me, it almost seems like what Alaska was 50 years ago or so.
Yeah, you're right. It's obviously the environment, the habitats, and all are real similar. It's a Pacific Ocean, and then the mountains, and then it's at the same latitude or the same, latitude north. So everything looks really familiar. You've got your moose, you have your salmon, and they go up the streams, and you would think you're in Alaska, but it's more primitive. We landed in Petropavlovsk, a hard word to say. That used to be their secret submarine base. Nobody got to go there but the Soviet military, really. But of course, now it was open. We landed there, and then we had to start driving north. That particular trip to get from home to the camp took me 73 hours, I think. Oof. There was an overnight or two. But I added up all the different conveyances we used to get there, and I came up with 11.
Wow.
Trains and buses and a helicopter and a ferry, and oh my gosh, it was quite an experience. So we were up well beyond any roads. We kind of got to the end of the road, and that's where the helicopter came in, picked us up, and flew us for another good hour and a half to drop us in the middle of nowhere. And no towns, obviously. There were a few little villages out toward the coast, but we sure didn't see any sign of human habitation in those mountains or the foothill valleys where we were. So you're right. It's like Alaska was, I don't know, 50 years ago, maybe even 100.
Okay. Yeah, you answered my other question, which I was curious about the travel to go to a place like that, but that almost makes it, we'll just go back to Alaska. That's a haul.
If you could fly the whole thing, it wouldn't be bad. But when you have to transfer to a van and then a bus and then a tractor and then put on some snowshoes and a snowmobile, we had to get on a snowmobile to get to the last little ways to camp. So yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Yeah, nice.
But that's what adds to the experience, and I think that's what people want to hear. Those are the stories that they want to hear, stuff like that, because it's so different from what they've done. And the other thing that we're all able to experience up here is remoteness. Most of our clients come from a place where, their neighbors are pretty close and everything's pretty tight. But I think people like remote. They like to get away from stuff and think that they're on the end of the planet, and that's the appeal for them.
Yeah, you're right. There is something appealing about that, and I've had that since I was just a kid. Even, we're talking 8 years old, perhaps. I always wanted to get away from the yard and out into the backwoods on Grandpa's farm, which was just a little woodlot that he planted. But to me, it was the wilderness. And it was just so cool to get away from the confines of the yard and the long arm of Mom and Grandma to pull you back in and say, don't do that. You could get back in those woods with your stick bow that you made and go hunting for sparrows or whatever you imagined you were after, and think you were in the wilderness. And you just instinctively had that desire, exactly what you said, Lee. Yeah. And I think definitely a big reason why so many of us want to have these adventures, why we want to go to Alaska or Africa. We want to live that kind of a wild adventure too. And the really cool thing is, given where we are, 21st century, And as civilized and developed as the world is these days, isn't it amazing that we can still get out into some wilderness and still interact with the same wildlife that was here 500 years ago? To me, that's really
Yeah,
remarkable.
for sure.
Well, let me ask you this, Ron. Because you live in Idaho, I grew up reading Elmer Keith and Jack O'Connor, and of course Elmer was there most of his life, and Jack moved there after World War II. How much has Idaho changed, in the last 40 years? And like where Elmer Keith was up on the Salmon River, I mean, that was really wild, rugged country up there. And I mean, it's one of the few places where you could still shoot sheep and things like that. How much has Idaho changed? And are you glad that that's where you live?
Yeah, I am glad. We've got a little saying out here, thank God I live in Idaho. In fact, years ago when I had moved here in 84, I think it was, and within a few years, the Idaho tourism department or something came up with this theme, thank God I live in Idaho. And they used a bunch of my photos, and I think they even interviewed me for a production that they put out about why it's so wonderful to live in Idaho. And obviously the big part is what you're just mentioning. Yeah, you can go to Elmer Keith's place up on the Salmon and get on that river and float down it for, gosh, I don't know how many miles, but I can remember the last time I think I did it, floating through there was something like a 4-day trip. So you can imagine being on a river, a fast river with big rapids, and you're floating down that thing for 4 days before you get to civilization on the other end of it. Pretty cool. But it goes through a wilderness. Idaho has some of the greatest wilderness areas in the lower 48 between us and Montana. I'm not sure, but I think Idaho has more millions of acres that are in official wilderness, which can never be developed, which is pretty exciting. Now, it's not highly productive wilderness. I always say they granted wilderness status to this area because most of the ground is granite. It was granted granite because they didn't make any money off of it by farming it or anything else. But that is where a lot of our moose and bighorn sheep and even mountain goats that still thrive, but they're few and far between. A lot of guys will come out and think, oh my gosh, I'm going moose hunting in the Idaho wilderness, the Frank Church Wilderness of No Return. Doesn't that sound like a wild place?
Yeah.
And they go on a 10-day hunt and they never see one because there's just huge, huge country. You stand on one ridge and you look across to the other ridge and it might be 3 miles away. And to get there, you probably have to go a mile down and then a mile back up on some pretty steep slopes. It is really crazy stuff. Big, big wild country. But it has changed in the flatter areas, the settled ground, what was farm ground. They started farming it in the 1860s. There was a gold strike and a bunch of miners came in, and then people came in and started farming and putting in orchards to supply the miners and stuff. And things progressed from there. So in the southern part of the state along the Snake River, there are big, flat, open plains. Used to be sagebrush and grass, but they took water out of the river to irrigate it. So that's where all the famous potatoes come from. They grow a lot of different crops there. And then in the sagegrass hills where they're not irrigated, they're running cattle. So that whole southern strip is pretty much ranch country and or farm country. But what has happened to change it a lot in the last 25 years has been new people moving in, especially from California. Folks in California just can't put up with the crazy political environment over there anymore. So they flee to Idaho. And it was, we'll say 10, 15 years ago, the common refrain was, we sold our house in California for $1 million and we bought a equally large or better quality one in Idaho for $400,000. But so many of them did that the population we were one of the fastest growing states, I think, in the union for 3 or 4 years, and we may still be because it's continuing. So now when you drive across country that used to have a red barn off in the distance, and then there might be 2-3 miles before there was another red barn and a herd of cattle, now there'll be every 5 to 15 acres in a little homestead where some wealthy folks have bought property and they threw a couple of horses on it and they're living the dream. And who can blame them? Who doesn't want to have something like that? But at that time, Idaho property compared to where they come from was affordable. So they moved in, and And it's easy to condemn that, and I pretty much always do, because I see it as my hunting grounds being eaten up. Can't go there anymore. Not only is the ground no longer available for hunting, but the house sits there. There's probably not an elk living there anymore. And the sage grouse populations declines from all that stuff. So it's the same old story that this country has, ever since it was founded. People develop things for their comfort and use, and that often sacrifices open spaces and wildlife. So it's always the challenge to maintain good wildlife populations and the freedom to use those, what I call sustainable use, when all this development pops up. So that's kind of the issue that we're facing in the West. And it's not just Idaho, it's in Utah, it's in Colorado, it's in all the Western states, because that's the latest place for folks to go to escape what they've created back where they live.
It's here too, and they're coming from Boston and New York here.
Yeah.
But they bring their politics with them is the problem. They bring their politics and they want to change it. They want to make it like it was where they left. So why are they coming here? Like that's the tough part.
Same thing out here. Yeah, you scratch your head. You go, why did you guys move here? If you want to change it to where it was, where you came from, you fled that, and now you want to make it the same? That doesn't make any sense. Go figure.
Another thing that happened was, because we are so close to Boston, when the pandemic hit in 2020, everybody down there decided they should have a getaway place up here in Maine. So our real estate just went crazy, because everybody, they thought, man, if stuff really hits the fan, we better have a place to get away to. So that was not good either.
As you all know, Big Woods Bucks is devoted to promoting the best equipment for tracking and still hunting the big woods. Part of that equation for success is the sights that sit on your hunting rifle. We've chosen Skinner Sights as the company to produce our custom-built BWB Tracker Series peep sight. It's constructed of solid steel, has our custom ghost ring, and was co-developed by some of the best trackers in the world. To get yours, go to bigwoodsbucks.com and click on the Optics tab.
Pine State Armory in Skowhegan is your ultimate destination for hunting and outdoor gear. Located at 338 Madison Avenue, we're more than just a store, we're family. Nick and Jess and their friendly dogs, Bailey and Ruby, are always ready to greet you. Pine State Armory is a family-friendly store where safety meets expertise. Your kids are always welcome, and if you're new to the sport, we're here to help with gear recommendations and the knowledge and information you need to get started right. Looking to buy, sell, or trade firearms, whether new or used, we have what you need. And to those who serve our country, we're proud to offer a military discount as a token of our appreciation. Visit us today at Pine State Armory, 338 Madison Avenue, Unit 8 in Skowhegan, and experience the great outdoors like never before.
Hey folks, Rick Libby here from Big Woods Bucks. I'm here today to tell you about our new packs. This is our new small pack, which the first time I saw it, Chris showed it to me and I said, that's the nooner, because that's the perfect pack if I'm getting on a buck track at noon. And it'll hold a sandwich, your water, a little bit of gear. It's virgin wool, made in USA, waterproof resistant, has a liner on the inside. It's a great pack. This pack, this is our newest large pack, which when I used to carry the older pack, I always wore suspenders because it bothered my hips a little bit. So we designed one with shoulder straps, and this is a great pack. It takes the weight off your hips, puts it onto your shoulders. It's got a GPS pouch right here in the top you slide in. Same deal, it's water resistant on the inside, got that liner. It's a perfect pack. So I go to bigwoodsbucks.com, get yours today, and I'll see you on the track.
Hey, Hal here. Just wanted to tell you we're excited about our partnership with Minus 33. Minus 33 specialized merino wool base layers for outdoor enthusiasts, from tops and bottoms to hats, socks, gloves. And our gear is going to keep you warm and comfortable no matter what adventure you're on, especially those big woods ones. We're a fifth-generation family, owned and operated. a New Hampshire woolen textile manufacturer. They have over 106 years of woolen expertise, and they started manufacturing woolen socks, the Mountain Heritage ones, in New Hampshire in 2018, with the idea that a quality product, affordable pricing, and can be worn and loved from season to season, no matter what your experience level or skill is, so no one should feel uncomfortable or ill-prepared in the outdoor community. Having a reliable gear is one of the first steps towards a lifetime of passion or whatever activity it is. And my caveat to that is you got to wear your woolies. Cotton is death.
Hey, Hal here. Finally got some good news for all you. Our jackets are finally in. It's been a long process, but we got them done and got them right with all our new features and stuff in them. So some of the new features we added was a game pouch in the back you can access from inside with dividers in it. It's just like the original one. Mine's the original one, not the new one. It's got your slash front pockets where you can get in and get at your GPS or whatever you carry in your front ones. They're all lined with, the pockets are lined with Microtech fleece, so it's nice and warm on your hands when you put it in. Microtech's fleece. Got your slash pockets here. Just 100% wool, virgin wool. I think they call it's 100% virgin wool, but it's 85% wool with some nylon to make it stronger. Tight woven. And the vest, I don't have the vest on it. The vest snaps on. Your orange cape comes with it. And we're going to have the green checkered jackets come in 22-ounce wool, and we have plain green, forest green, same color as our pants that are coming, and those are in 18-ounce, a lighter wool, so you can have a 3-season jacket or a 4-season jacket. And the pants will be coming in a couple weeks, and just in time for deer season. So get them ordered up and we'll get them shipped right out to you. Good luck on the trail.
So Ron, where's the is there white-tailed deer down where you live, or you got to get up in the mountains more?
Yeah, well, you got to go north.
North,
North
yeah.
Idaho is good whitetail country. Got some really good deer, and I've hunted it a lot. I used to live up there, and it's just, yeah, classic stuff. But down here in the sagebrush desert, we don't have any. I suspect they're going to eventually get here because there's irrigated cornfields. And anytime you start irrigating or growing cereal crops of some kind, if there's any kind of brush for those whitetail to hide in, eventually they're going to find their way down here. And some of the locals will say, yeah, so-and-so saw a whitetail the other day. You hear those reports every once in a while. So I think it's just a matter of time and we'll have them.
Yeah, so I've hunted over in that Swan River Valley over in Montana several times, and it was pretty good deer hunting over there, and they talked about trying Idaho too, because it's really only like one mountain range over from that valley.
Yeah, it's not too far over to the border. Then you got that narrow neck of Idaho up in the north, and that's classic whitetail, elk, moose, black bear country. Used to be a lot more grizzly bears up there. You know, that way up there on the tip of that is where we have our last woodland caribou herd.
Oh.
I don't know if it's, they've been trying for years and years to keep it alive, and then they found out that grizzly bears were killing all the calves. So they're trying to keep the grizzly population up in the same area they're trying to keep the caribou population up. But that didn't work too well because the caribou were being eaten by the grizzlies.
They tried to do that here back in I think it was in the 80s. They tried to bring the woodland caribou back here because they all migrated north when they were cutting off the forests with all that lichen that they eat. And they imported some from Newfoundland, I think, and brought them over, and they kept them in pens and raised them and got some new calves going, and they started turning them loose, and every one of them died, and they would never admit. They kept saying the bears are getting them, but really what was getting them was about the same time the coyotes were getting a little thicker up in the North Maine woods. And I would say it was the coyotes that was getting them, because they're not a very big animal. They're not much bigger than our deer, you know.
Yeah, they're not a huge.
Yeah.
It's the smallest subspecies of caribou, I think.
Yeah, it's the smallest. And they're, for a coyote, that wasn't no big deal to kill them, because they're not that wary anyways. You know what I mean? They're not like a deer, and they don't run as fast. And I think they were easy pickings for coyotes.
Yeah, I don't know. There's obviously the caribou was adapted to the wilderness before we showed up, and they were handling whatever predators were there. Wolves, probably more than coyotes, but enough things have changed. Whether it's the forestry, the different growth stages of the woods that have been cut over, or the logging roads, the highways. I mean, just so many different changes, and they're probably subtle for us. We can't quite figure it out what it is, but I think it all adds up to making it not an ideal situation for something like the caribou to make it. But yeah.
And
Anyway.
caribou seem in general, their populations are obviously, like, I know our herds here in Quebec, and the same thing out in Alaska, where they fluctuate so drastically. I mean, they'll go from a herd of 200,000 animals down to 13,000, or,
Yeah.
and a lot of times they really don't even know why those herds are dropping like that.
Yeah, I think in my experience, I'm saying it's a sort of a cyclical thing on a large scale. We're all familiar with the snowshoe hare 10-year cycle up and down thing, and the lynx and how it plays a role in that. I think something similar is happening with caribou. When I first started hunting up in caribou country in the far north, you would see those famous caribou moss. It's really a lichen, and they would be, almost up toward 9 inches tall, all branched out, sort of a pale white, faintly greenish sort of a plant, really interesting looking, but lush. It just looked lush. They were growing in little miniature forests. And that, of course, was what the caribou eat in winter, especially that lichen. Then when that population went crazy and they were letting you buy 5 tags for caribou hunting up in places like northern Quebec, we'd fly up there, and as we flew in, I'm looking down, of course, to see what's going on, and there's all these trails, and it reminded me of feedlots in down here where the cattle will, or a water hole where the cattle all converge on that tank of water, and you get all these different paths leading into it like spokes of a wheel. I was seeing that up there at crossings between 2 lakes where they would cross the river, and it's all caribou. Obviously, there's no cattle up there, and it was like a feedlot down there. And then when we were hunting, we were noticing sick caribou. I think I shot 3 bulls, were all sick. One of them was just, he looked a real mess. We just put him out of his misery. You could hear him trying to breathe through some sort of an obstruction. And he had warts growing on him, skin tags or something weird, And I asked the guide, I said, what the heck is going on? He says, I don't know, Fish and Game says there's some kind of a disease going through the herd or something. Well, it was probably from overpopulation, was what I figured. So looking at that ground, those lichens were now gone, and there were just little bits and pieces, the broken ones on the ground. So my small brain just thought, I think the population got so high that they ate the vegetation down to a level where they couldn't sustain them anymore in the winter. And you can imagine how long it takes up in that north country for vegetation to grow back, and that might be part of this cycle. So they're going to now be low, and the vegetation will be able to regenerate until it reaches a point where the caribou can successfully keep a calf through the next winter and the next one, and that calf will have some more calves. And I would say within 10 years, you're probably pushing up towards 200, 500,000, and you got a bunch more caribou. I don't know. That's just the way I kind of analyzed it.
Well, I think it all works that way. Mother Nature's going to take care of those overpopulations. That's what happens with the snowshoe hares there. They're prolific, and they get too many, and they eat themselves out, and then they all die in one winter, I've seen that. That happened here about 15 years ago. We went from places there'd be hundreds and hundreds, and they were in the grown up clear cuts or plantations and regeneration. But I mean, they went from lots of them to nothing in one winter. I mean, you couldn't find a rabbit track in them places, and then it's slowly now coming back. It won't come back in the same places because those have got grown by the cover, but that's what's happened. And I think that's what happened with our moose. We had a big moose die off, and everybody blamed it on the tick, but the winter tick on the moose is really a parasitic thing that takes place with the overpopulation of moose because their whole life cycle's on the moose, and they suck the life out of them in the winter. And we've been through that, and that's finally straightening out again. We were having almost 100% calf mortality on the moose for nearly 10 years, 80 and 90% mortality, and now it's gone the other way that 80 and 90% are surviving it. So another cycle.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that snowshoe hare cycle, there were similar things with the jackrabbits out in the West. And there are plenty of stories documented, photographs and everything else. The jacks would become so abundant that they would eat everything, and these farmers and ranchers would essentially be eaten out of house and home by jackrabbits. So in winter, when the jacks descended on the haystacks and things, the farmers would get together and make a big surround, and they would all walk to the middle and drive these jackrabbits into a tighter and tighter circle. And they would shoot some with shotguns, and I even got in on some of this stuff when I was a kid back in South Dakota. But for a while there, it was like the shotgun shells cost too much. Let's just club them. They literally used baseball bats and sticks and clubbed these jackrabbits by the hundreds because they were so abundant. They just hit that population peak. And I think part of the reason was the new crops that came in provided extra nutrition for them. So the jacks were always there, but they were constrained by the native plant species. And then in winter, you've got a bottleneck, so you couldn't keep a high population. People move in, they plow up some ground, they plant some alfalfa. Holy mackerel, here's a protein source. And that alfalfa is available to those jackrabbits, even through the snow. We used to hunt them in the alfalfa fields under the snow when I was a kid. If the snow wasn't too deep, they would dig down and eat those dried up alfalfas. And you'd go out into the alfalfa field and shoot jackrabbits. And we would get pretty significant swarms of them where you'd see 100 or 200 in a bunch. So similar deals happen. It's just, you've got to understand, or at least try to understand, what made these differences. Why do they become abundant and then suddenly they disappear?
Yeah, so our moose, the winter feed for moose is, they browse on hardwood a lot too, but the balsam fir is a main food for the moose in the winter. And the moose traditionally, we live here in pretty mountainous country, and the top of all the mountains was spruce and balsam fir. And up on those mountains you get a lot of die off and the trees fall and then the new stuff comes up. But that coincided with our die off. Was you go up in some of the high mountains where the moose used to, that's where they'd spend the winter, way up in the mountains. There isn't anything left to eat. Some of the mountains, it looks like a national park up there because you can look up through the woods and everything below 10 feet high, there isn't anything to eat. And in all the short balsams, that might be, 10 feet or less in height, completely stripped. They look like skeletons and they just die. So now the moose can't live there anymore. A couple might scratch out a living, but not the numbers they used to be. They've had to adjust and move down and spend more time around where they've logged, and it's got that balsam regeneration,
Yeah, on the other side of that one, you've got that understory stripped, and you just have big trunks of mature trees, like you said, 10 feet high. Well, there's no vegetation for any other wildlife down there. Well, like where would a ruffed grouse have a nest in an area like that? And you think about all the small birds, the ground nesting birds and rabbits and rodents and whatever. It just changes things so much because it's all, so you have this, call it the foundation of the small creatures that feed the slightly larger ones, and you work your way up. Boy, you get an overpopulation of deer or moose that strip that ground cover, and you've lost all of that. The ramifications are really significant.
Yeah, for sure.
So Ron, switching gears a little bit to a little gun talk. I was listening to a podcast that you did with, I believe it was with Joseph Von Benedict, the Backcountry Hunters podcast, and you were talking about. It was an episode on the best deer rifle, which obviously that's such a, wide-ranging subject, and everyone's got their opinion. But
yeah,
I was a little. It hurt my feelings a little bit when you guys glossed over the pump so quickly. And because I was curious to hear what you guys had to say about pump rifles for deer hunting, and as you probably know, they're pretty popular here in the Northeast, more so than anywhere. Do you think it's just a geographic thing as far as the culture?
Yeah, I think it is a big cultural thing. If you grow up in an area where the pump is popular, obviously the new hunters are going to associate that with hunting. It's like, what are you going to get? Well, I'm going to get one like Dad or Grandpa or somebody who already has one. Well, out here, it's about like trying to find a polar bear in Idaho to find a pump action rifle. They just don't have it, and nobody has anything. Not that they aren't any good, but you just don't find them to have any kind of experience with them. I actually love pump actions. When I was a kid, of course, we started pheasant hunting with pumps. You get a Model 12 Winchester or an 870 Remington, and off you go on your pheasant hunt. Well, you can translate to a rifle pretty smoothly. And I've always thought, as popular as lever rifles are, the action required to cycle a lever action does not lend itself to staying on target quite as nicely as a slide action. So if you're on target and you slide that back and forth, you are maintaining your sight picture with the barrel right down the target. And it's so slick and fast and doesn't jar you off. I love it, but I've never had a center fire slide action rifle. 22s, I love it in a 22, but my buddy's got a 270, that Remington 7600. I don't know if his was a 760. He's had it all his life, and he's even a little older than I am, but he has great success with his. I wish that they would start making the darn things again. Do you know of any brand that is selling a center fire rifle like that pump?
No.
No, Browning attempted to have their style. It was the BPR, and that was
Short-lived.
yes. And Remington, of course, their story is well known, and everyone always wonders up here. You see stuff on social media posts whether they're going to bring it back or not, but it seems like the consensus is Hal would know more than me, but that.
I don't think they will, because they can barely get a 700 and 870 out with the new ownership here. So you probably know a little bit about that too, Ron. But so what it's caused though out here is the market is dried up on them, and the prices are like you can't believe. Like a carbine, like the carbines are the popular ones for in the woods. And if you could find a carbine, it's going to be somebody's grandpa had it in their closet, and there it is, because you can't find them really. If you do find one, I mean, you're probably starting at $2,500 for it, if it's in any kind of shape. And
what puzzles me is there are so many small rifle makers now because of the CNC machining and all this stuff. It's become a lot easier to manufacture parts. And if you can get some old design that is no longer protected by I want to say copyright, that's for writing up. What is it? That
trademark?
Trademark. No, not a trademark. There's another thing. But at any rate, the thing where you cannot make it because somebody else did and they've got 20 years or something where they're exclusive. But these older designs like that,
yeah,
the patent on it.
The patents on it.
There you go. Those difficult words a writer like me just doesn't know. Limited vocabulary. But if the patent isn't on them anymore, you can make it. So why don't they make it? Like Henry has done a great job of making lever action rifles like crazy now.
Yeah.
And it's not an original design. It's essentially the 336 Marlin. Why can't somebody do that? You just design the darn thing on your computer, copy it essentially, and start producing it as a pump action. And, the machining is done automatically for you. So you should be able to make a fairly inexpensive pump action rifle. Unless it's a demand thing. But as you're telling me, you can't even find a used one for a decent price. You would think some enterprising machinist up there could start making the darn things.
There's a couple of them that are talking about it, but I think it's a big deal to get started, because you're not gonna, it's like anything. If you make a half a dozen of them, you can do that. But if the demand comes along and you can't supply a demand, things fizzle out quite quickly,
I suppose. A lot of stuff I don't understand about that, but here's an example of an old rifle that somebody's currently making. This is a Frazier falling block rifle with a lever on the side to drop the block. I don't know if you can see it happening here, guys.
Yeah.
But what a cool design. When this design was put out? 1880.
Yeah.
880. And there's some guy who's building them now. He sells these actions for somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000, and then a gun maker will put a barrel on it and stock it, and bingo, you've got yourself a Frazier falling block single shot. And I think, well, if they can do that, why can't they do a pump?
They can, but I think what I was getting at was, I think it may be because these pumps are usually you'd call it maybe a working man's gun or something like that.
Sure.
And they're not going to spend $2,000 or $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 on one, So
yeah, definitely.
What you're talking about is more of a custom gun, but
yeah.
Although, having said that, Hal, who would have thought that all three of us, since Remington stopped making pumps, we've been, buying and selling them, and I would have never thought that, you'd be selling Remington pump guns for $2,000, that were made in the 70s and 80s, but people are so nervous about not being able to find one that it's gotten out of control. What I'd like to see is, and again, I don't know how long it would take for the patent to run out on it, but Ruger has done a wonderful job with the Marlins. I don't know if you've handled or shot those new Marlins, but I think they're some of the nicest Marlins ever made, because Ruger, the fit and finish on them seems to be really good, and we've had some guys on the team that got a hold of them and really like them. I was always hoping, I was a big fan of the Savage 99, and when they stopped making that because it cost too much, I thought, geez, Bill Ruger, he's got that whole investment casting thing going on. I thought, I bet he'd be able to make a 99 cheaper than Savage was making them. So that was my hope, that, that Ruger would buy out the 99 and start making them. But I think you'll find that it's cheaper to make the Marlins than it is a 99. So they're going to, they'll take that part of the market, but I don't foresee them doing the 99 either.
So, Ron, did you ever see that? It was put out back, I think, in the late 60s. It's you can find it online on the Remington website when they did it was like a tour of the Ilion plant and how they were making the guns and putting them together. And then at the end of it, they had a competition. Did you see that one?
No, I don't remember seeing that.
Yeah, it's on there. It's a pretty cool little film. It's about 15 minutes, I think. And they're showing you how they make. They were doing the 700, and they were doing 7600, 760 it would have been then. And I don't know what the other one was they were doing. It might have been the 742 or something. So say there was them three guns they were showing you how they made them in the process. But at the end, they said, we're going to go out and we're going to have a shooting contest. And they had three guys there that were either the gunsmiths or whatever it was. And they went out back at the range they had there or something, or took them somewhere. And they had a shoot-off with those guns. And you know which one won the shoot-off?
I'm going to have to guess it's the 760.
It was. Beat out the 700. Because that's it's got a free-floating barrel.
Yeah.
And back then,
they're a lot more accurate than people think, aren't they?
They're deadly accurate. And back then, those the 700s didn't come with a free floater. You know, they made plastic stocks after where they were and stuff.
Yep.
But yeah, it won the shooting contest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, people get crazy ideas about these older or different rifle actions, like lever actions. Everybody knows the lever action is not very accurate. A while ago, we did a 30-06 week in which we compared 12 different brand new rifles chambered for the 30-06. And most of them wouldn't shoot very well. An inch and a half, well, that's plenty good enough for deer out to 300 yards, but most people aren't going to settle for that anymore. You got to have at least an MOA rifle, right? The only one that consistently shot sub-MOA was a Browning lever action.
Yep.
And most people would say, what, the lever action? I mean, why would that? But it did.
Yeah.
And that BLR is a pretty nice piece of machinery too.
Hey, are those, if you're up in your neck of the woods looking for this kind of convenient, fast action follow-up shot thing in the heavy cover and all, and you're not finding the pumps, what are people buying then? Are they going with lever actions as a preferred style?
Yeah, I think probably most of them are. You know, a lot of them are going, they're looking at the new Marlins, but a lot of them looking for the old Marlins too. And ironically, they're not searching for the old Winchester 94s or anything. And I don't know if that's just a function of they only made, you know, a couple calibers and they think they're a little bit lighter. But you know, the guys are into big guns now, I think. So a lot of them actually are looking for they're looking for the guide guns, they call it, or the 1895, 45 70s and stuff, you know. That's becoming more popular, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I think to bear that out, when Ruger took over, the first gun that they made was the 1895 45-70. Everybody thought they'd make the 336 and 30-30, but when Remington closed the plant down, they were actually selling more of the 95s and 45-70.
Yeah, I think that I was working for Remington then, and I remember going at the SHOT Show and stuff. Anytime they'd come out with something, you know, that 1895, you know, they'd make a stainless, they'd make these different variations, and everybody looked at them. Everybody picked those up and looked at them, and, you know, they had the bigger level loop on some, and then they'd put some like paracord in the level, and guys they loved those guns. And I think it just was another, like, I don't know if you want to call it a fad, but they got popular that way.
Yeah.
And they still are.
It's
They're
kind of
still,
fashion.
yeah.
I think it's a fashion statement. You know, we go through cycles, and right now it just seems like the nostalgia for the good old lever action is really driving a lot of sales, which I think is great. You know, increase the sale of those lever actions. I'd hate to see those slide away like the pump actions did. I don't think they will, but they've really come on strong now. People really want those.
Yeah, they won't slide away because there's too many companies making them, you know, or making a lot of different variations. But I know towards the end of it, even in through the 90s, when Remington, they changed that 7600. It came out in 1980. It went from the 760 to the 7600. And basically all they did from the later 760s was they changed the bolt. They went from what they called a 19 lug bolt to a 7. It was probably a lot easier to manufacture, right? The bolts only got 7 lugs on it, you know. And and through the 80s, they were great. And then 1990 was the big change. They really cheapened things in the 90s. They went to the trigger assembly was cast aluminum, and they painted it black, and they went away from that fleur-de-lure with that DuPont finish, right? We always familiar with, and they went to a satin finish with that laser cut checkering. And they cheapened the blue one, and I asked them why they did that. And all of the stuff they did was basically for economics. It was economically cheaper, like the bluing through the 90s on those. Well, it was on the 760s, but when you got into the 7600s through the 80s, was that real high gloss blue one that we liked, you know. It was the same thing on the 870s too in the 1100s. But anyways, they said that was an 11 process bluing, and they cut it back to a 7. So in other words, they lightened up the process on it, so you didn't get that. And then they called it, instead of high gloss, they called it satin. So everything from the 90s on, the only ones you'd get a high gloss on was like they made them 200th anniversary ones back in 2016. Those were high gloss, both in the stock and the finish. But they said the reason they had to do that was compete, and I was running a quality improvement team for Remington. There was 5 of us doing it, try to get that quality back up, and that I started in probably 13 on that, 2014. But anyways, we called it the race to the bottom, and it wasn't just Remington. It was all the gun companies was seeing how cheap they could get one, because Walmart wanted something cheap. And so we called it the race to the bottom. They were all cheapening their guns and competing for the cheapest gun. And that was the downfall, I believe, of Remington, really, when they went that way. We kept telling them, just make quality guns and people will buy them. They didn't listen. They had to make 10 variations of the 700 and things like that, and people didn't want that, They wanted a nice gun.
Yeah, and I think you were proven to be right, given where Remington is today. And then you look at all these boutique rifle makers and what they charge for even a bolt action rifle. Gosh, guys are spending $8,000 for bolt action rifles.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're well made, and they're going to shoot under MOA, and some of them are even guaranteed to shoot a quarter MOA, and guys will buy them. But of course, who needs a quarter MOA rifle to shoot any big game animal out to as far as you can hit him? That's just way more accuracy than you need.
You know what I say about a quarter MOA? There's very, very few people that can shoot that anyway. So the gun doesn't have to do it.
No, I think it's bragging rights. You can say to all your buddies, well, my rifle shoots quarter MOA. Or as I usually hear it, I can shoot 5 shots under a dime any day, all day long, until you say, do it.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, do it off your hind legs, not a rest. Do it while you.
Well, even off of a bench rest, they can do it. You might have done it once in their life, and boy, did that ever make it.
I'd have the guys. I made the guys go to the range on Monday mornings before we started bear hunting every week, and the guy that would come back with he had to personally show me his target of them dime-sized groups or something at 50 yards, because I told him just shoot at 50, make sure your gun's on, because the baits, there weren't any baits past 50. But anyway, those were the guys that would wound or miss a bear at 30 yards. It was like clockwork. The guy that come up with a 12 gauge shotgun with no sights on it and shot a pie plate at 50 yards. When he shot, you went in and the bear was laying there dead at the barrel. The other ones, you'd be chasing them half the night and never get them.
Yeah.
Hey, Ron, something that you mentioned bolt action a minute ago, and it's something I've always thought when watching some of these videos from Europe. Why is the straight pull bolt not common or used at all here in the States?
I don't know. I guess it's mostly tradition with the Savage, Winchester, Remington, Browning. We were always using bolts, turn bolts, lift it up, and then pull back. Whereas the Europeans went with the straight pull. That just never really seemed to catch on here. I think we're getting back to this cultural thing again. You're not familiar with it, like, what the heck is this? But it is starting now. Savage brought in that one style that has the ball bearings for locking lugs around near the front of the bolt body. That one has been in existence over in Europe for quite a long time. And then the Blaser system, where they have springs, when you shove forward to lock in, there's just a whole series around the bolt head with little fingers, splines, you could call them, that pop up to lock into the recess. That all strikes us as pretty weird stuff because we've never seen it before. Until you bump into one of those and see it in action, you never think to buy one, so nobody makes them. It becomes a chicken and the egg thing, which came first. But I think with Savage sticking its toes into the water here, these straight pulls, people are starting to talk about them. So they might take off, and you're right, it does speed things up a little bit. Merkel makes one too. I think I did a video good 10 years ago on the speed of a Blaser and or a Merkel compared to the turn bolts that we're used to. It doesn't amount to a fraction of a second, but like you said, on those driven boar hunts where they're just running through those and shooting one running boar after another, it's pretty amazingly fast.
I've always wondered if it would ever fit in with the style of hunting that we do with the track, and that's all, because there are guys that are really good with a bolt that track and consistently shoot bucks every year, and it's just what they always hunted with, so familiarity, but never shooting a straight pull. I just was always curious about that.
Yeah, I've used a Blaser more than anything else, and it certainly works well, and it is fast. But I've never really needed that speed. I always say, you don't need fast follow-up shots if you hit him on your first shot. Of course, I mean, everybody says, yeah, right. But I think what happens is a psychological thing. If folks think, I've got a 5-round magazine here on an autoloader or a pump or a lever, and boy, I'm really fast. Yeah, you're fast at cycling and pulling the trigger, but you're not all that accurate at putting those bullets where they belong, and it gives you this false sense of security. If I miss that first shot, I've got 4 more. I just as soon make the first shot count because I can hit them a lot better on that one than the next 5.
Yeah.
I got a question for you, Ron, and we're not trying to sell anybody's product, but I read all the magazines, and you were talking about these boutique rifles where they have ultra lightweight or ultra long range, and you can spend $7,000 or $8,000. I've noticed a lot lately, and I read rifle and hand loader and all those, but I know you're a big fan of lightweight rifles, and you're also a big fan of the 7mm08. I've been thinking about if I was going to get a lightweight bolt gun that would shoot really good. I've been looking at those Howa lightweights. You can get one. I actually wish that they had a 22-inch barrel. I don't need the 20, but even with a 20, you can get most of the ballistics out of it. But they claim, 1-inch groups with a 5-pound rifle and some pretty decent calibers. Have you shot those, and what's your take on them? Yes, I tested one in a 6.5 Creedmoor a couple of years ago, and wow. When I saw the thing, I thought, what a Mattel toy this is. It's just ridiculous. Yet it has synthetic stock, and it just felt and looked like it was probably pretty cheap. I started shooting that thing, and oh my gosh, I almost fell in love. And I used it in that deer season, and it carries so easily, and it points kind of naturally. I hung a Banish suppressor on the end of it, and that really made it quick and easy. I've lost so much of my hearing from shooting and not protecting it that I'm a little bit hesitant to shoot unless I've had time to stuff something in my ears or put on some shells and things. It's a pain in the butt, but it's almost essential because I don't have much hearing left. I can't afford to lose what's left. But with the suppressor, I'm now free again to just say, oh, there's my chance, and take the shot. So that whole system worked beautifully, and I would right with you on that 708. Somebody interviewed me the other day and said, what would be your ideal whitetail, Eastern whitetail woods cartridge? And I went with the 7mm 08 Remington because I think it's just ideal. Yeah, I've got 2 girls that are coming on the moose hunt this year, and their father said, she's going to shoot a 7mm 08. Is that big enough for moose? And I said, yeah. I said, it's more about the shot placement, but I said, if you get a 7mm 08 with some decent bullets in it, and she shoots that deer, shoots that moose anywhere near the front shoulder, you're going to have a moose. I think people, we have it happen all the time where they go out and they buy a 338 or a 375 to come to Maine on their moose hunt, and they don't need it. I'm not saying that it's not a good cartridge, and in Alaska or someplace where you might have to shoot longer range, the 300 Magnum might be necessary, or not necessary, but it would be something you might look at. But in Maine, we're shooting everything up close and personal, And I've had a bunch of people shoot moose with a 7mm08, and if they used a decent bullet, and everybody thinks you need a Barnes X or a nozzle petition, and those are great. I like them. But I've had guys that shot, 150 grain Remington Corlocks, and again, they're shooting their moose at 100 yards. If you stick that thing behind the shoulder and double lung them, they ain't going anywhere. You're going to get them. And I just think that shot placement, we tell everybody that shot placement is way more important. I recommend to my guys, if their deer rifle is a 30-06 or 308, that's what I want them to bring on the moose hunt. It's enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And you hear that everywhere in Africa and Alaska and all over. And a lot of people will say, oh, no, that 708's just too small. It's not going to work. But the 308 Winchester is great. Well, come on, it's the same case. All you did was go from a 30 to a 28. That is it's a sheet of paper difference in the diameter practically. And they'll both shoot the same weight bullets. Even if you're going out with your 308 and a 150 grain bullet, and you're going with your 7mm 08 and a 150 grain bullet, the 7mm 08 bullet is going to have the same velocity and the same energy as the one out of the 308. And downrange, because it's narrower and has a higher BC, meaning it's more efficient, it's going to actually retain more energy downrange than the 308. Doesn't amount to a hill of beans, but it's still real.
Right.
So essentially you're saying the 708 is going to do just what the 308 does. Just going to recoil a little bit less if you use a lighter bullet. And, like you were talking about your girls, start them off with a 120 grain bullet. They'll do just fine, and there'll be less recoil. And if you want to get real serious about deep penetration, go to 160 grain or even 175 grain. And then you've got to remember what Bell did in Africa in 1902 or so, when he was shooting elephants with a 7mm 08, but he called it the 757 Mauser. They're both shooting the same velocity with the same bullets. And he was averaging 1.5 bullets for every elephant he took.
Yeah.
With a puny little 7x57 Mauser. Pretty cool.
The dad that I talked with last week, he was able to, you can get reduced loads now for the popular calibers, and that's what he did. He got some, I think they were 120 grain reduced loads, and he got her a couple boxes, and she's going to shoot those to get used to the gun, and then he's going to give her some 150s for the moose hunt. And I told him, I said, I think that's a good plan. She's 13 years old. She probably weighs 100 pounds maybe, and I'd much rather have her come and not be scared of her gun than be overgunned.
Absolutely. Perfect advice.
I had when my daughter was 11, she got drawn for the moose hunt, and I had someone loan me a gun. It was a Browning A-Bolt youth model in 7mm 08, and I had no experience with that caliber then, besides being a phenomenal gun for a young girl. But she got a moose that year, and then since then, that's the gun that she always uses, the 7mm 08, and she shot a moose with it a couple years ago, and it's always been the same as what Lee said. Clients will call and ask, and not just kids or girls, but guys will show up with it's just their rifle they can shoot best with. So I always say, bring it.
Yeah, good advice.
Speaking of moose, Ron, do you ever apply for a Maine moose permit?
No, I sure haven't. It's kind of a romantic idea, but I didn't really look into it all that deeply because I'm living out here. I mean, we've got moose in our backyard. I've had them 20 yards from the kitchen window. And I've hunted in BC, and I've taken them in Alaska. So it's like, I've got plenty of moose right here. Why do I have to go all the way to Maine? And then if I want to really start to feel good about myself, I will pretend that I am looking out for all you Mainers who want to shoot a moose. Yeah. I don't need to come in there and steal your moose from you.
No, they give 10% of them to non-residents everywhere. You're only drawing against the other non-residents, not us.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, I'm going to apply.
What areas of Alaska have you been moose hunting?
Oh, I've hunted in the Alaska range east of Denali Park a couple of times. I remember took a nice one there. Where else did I take them up there? Gosh, I saw some big ones west of the park, but I didn't shoot that time. I only had a caribou tag and a sheep tag. Boy, did I see a couple of big bulls right up there above timberline. Yeah. Oh, man.
So mostly up north then?
Yeah, and I think I've taken more moose in BC than I have in Alaska.
Yeah.
I think I've got 6. I think I've taken 6 or 7 bulls. It's pretty sad when you can't remember how many moose you've shot. Most people are dying to get one crack at them, and here I am with 6 of them.
Yeah, it's moose hunting is kind of an
I
addictive thing.
Yeah, I love mountain moose. I've never gone to the flat lowlands or the traditional get your birch bark moaner out and try to call them out of the bushes, and they're 30 yards from you and you can't see them because it's so thick. When you're up in the mountains in BC and Alaska, you get up high and you glass down, or you catch them out in the open. I remember taking one in the Alaska range when we were above tree line, and we camped that night. We had horses and we were packing along on the trails and stuff. And early in the morning, I glassed down to the river bottom and saw a big bull in an opening down there foraging. And I said to the guide, man, I think I'm gonna run down there and shoot him. And he said, oh, well, I'll get the horses and pack up the tent. And I said, we don't have time for that. I said, you stay here and watch him. I'm going to take a beeline down through there. I'll take a compass reading because I've got to go through all the spruce forest. You stay up here, and then if I get screwed up or lost, or if the moose moves or something, you can signal me. It was going to be about 3 miles. So I didn't think I was going to be able to see him giving me hand signals. So I said, if the moose moves to the west, put the horses on the west side of you, and vice versa. And we made all these arrangements. So I took my compass reading and I bailed off that mountain and went down there as fast as I could. And I got to the meadow, which I identified with a lone snag standing up in it. So when I hit that meadow with that lone snag, I knew I was in the right area where that moose had been. He was no longer there. So I turned around and I looked for the horses, and I couldn't even see the horses with my binocular. I just couldn't find them up there. And they were in the wide open. So I thought, well, heck, I'll just start hunting for him, still hunt. And I didn't go far along the edge of the woods there when I spotted him on the other side in the edge of the woods. So shot him from about 200 yards away, I think. But that gives you the advantage of the mountains by, you're up and you can look down into cover. Whereas when you're on the flats and you've got all the willow brush and everything, I mean, I remember one time we called a nice bull in for my wife, and it stopped. One more step and it would have been in the open, but it stopped behind that last tree, and you could see palms of the antlers off of both sides. And I thought, oh boy, here we go. First step he takes out of there, she's going to whack him. And the wind switched. I felt it on the back of my neck, and I went, no! And that moose just spun around and was out of there, and she never got a shot.
That sounds like a carbon copy of yours and Jason's moose. Jason's that one.
Yeah. Well, it's
yeah, but
that's common here when you're calling them in.
Is it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
they'll always. It's funny, and they come in like that. They got a habit of stopping behind something, and they just. Or if you're trying to call them into an opening, maybe an old, we call them winter roads, old grass roads, they'll stop before they come out in it, and they're just listening and smelling and listening and smelling.
Yeah.
And if the wind switches or does something, that's it. They're gone. Or sometimes they don't hear what they thought they heard, even if you call a little bit. They're nervous about it, and they won't step out sometimes. They'll just walk off.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had some here in Idaho. I was out, I think, sharp-tailed grouse hunting one time, and as I've said earlier, we get the early ground with grass slopes and then brush down in the bottom kind of a thing. So we were working the open grass for these birds, and I saw a young bull moose way out there, and said to my buddy, hey, look at there, here's the moose. And I started grunting at him. Here he came like he was on a string. And this guy comes right up to us. I could have taken him with a 20 gauge. Sometimes when you don't have a tag, that's when they're out in the open, and it'll come right up to you.
Oh, yeah.
Joe, I just wondering if we got time. I haven't asked him half the questions. We're going to have him on again, but we got plenty of time.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
A little bit different subject. I want to know, because I'm a big reader, and I've been reading since I was a kid. I read everything. I want to know a couple of guys.
Wait a minute now, Lee. And he retains it all.
Every word.
Every word. He's one of them, Ron. He's one of them.
Hey, yeah, all right, go ahead.
I'm going to watch it. He's going to show me up.
He's a speed reader.
No, what I'd really like to know is just pick a couple of guys that were inspirations for you that kind of got you in the writing game? And then maybe a couple of new guys in the last 10 or 15 years that you admire their writing and think they're going to do a good job.
Yeah, I can remember when I started. Of course, I was influenced by Jack O'Connor and all the old guys in the middle of the 20th century. But when I really got down to writing my own stuff in the middle of the 1970s, Jim Zumbo was standing out for me because he was a younger guy and he was cranking out a lot of great adventure hunting stories in American Hunter magazine especially. And that's one of the first magazines I sold to. So Jim definitely inspired me because here's a guy similar to my age who's making it work. And then John Barsness is the same age as I, and he and I actually went to college just a town apart. I was in a branch of the university and he was at the other branch, and his writing is excellent. I just always enjoyed John's. So I was reading him, and there were a whole bunch more, but Tom McIntyre was a heck of a writer. He just passed a couple of years ago, but he wrote a back page for Sports Afield magazine. He was a little cerebral for an outdoor writer, and he would tie in some just amazing analogies and bring literature into the equation and sort of elevate hunting from kind of the Bubba, I went hunting with my buddy, into something a little more deep that you could contemplate and think about. So I really enjoyed his stuff. Young guys right now, there seems like a paucity, but if you really dig into it, I know Joseph Von Benedict, who you guys mentioned on his podcast, he really knows his stuff, and he's got a good command of the English language and good syntax, easy to read. Nothing particularly poetic about it, but good, solid detail and information. There was somebody recently I read that did have that connection. Can't remember the name right now, but one that I'll go back to in the 20th century was Robert Rourke, and that's primarily Africa. But the Old Man and the Boy was a series he wrote for Field and Stream magazine about hunting in the southeast for quail and deer and things like that. But when he went to Africa on safari and he just was eaten up by this whole idea, and he wrote several books about it and lots of articles, and he really captures what is in our hearts and minds about this magic of being out on a hunt anywhere, whether it's Africa or anywhere else. It's all kind of the same feeling, but boy, he really captures it well. I would recommend anyone and everyone read Robert Rourke. It's spelled R-U-A-R-K. Horn of the Hunter and Use Enough Gun are two book titles that are worth looking up and reading. It's an easy read, yet he captures it. He doesn't use a lot of big, flowery words and stuff, kind of like Hemingway that way, but a little more easily readable, and he'll put you right there. You'll just love that stuff.
Yeah, I like the Old Man and the Boy there. That stuff is good.
Yeah.
Another guy that I met Craig Boddington once at LLB, and I was doing a moose seminar, and he was doing seminars on safari in Africa. But I told him a guy that I really liked, but it was like he was in and out of the picture all the time, and then I guess his personal life was complicated. But Gary Sitton, you remember Gary Sitton? That guy could really, really write, and Boddington told me the same thing. He said, because he had to edit his work and stuff. He said that guy was such a good writer. There wasn't much editing. He was really good, and I kind of miss him. He died young, but he was a guy that I really missed. But I wanted to know your opinion on the newer guys. I read that Joseph Von Benedict. He's in several publications now. I'm Facebook friends with his brother now, and his brother's quite an adventurer too. So yeah, thanks.
So Ron, along those lines, seems like Sports Afield should have some sort of story on the traditions of tracking and how we hunt here in the Northeast. So if you can ever fit it in your schedule to come out here and hunt with us, we'd love to have you.
Well, that's a nice invitation, guys. Even if I didn't have a rifle, I think it would be fun.
We'll have one here for you. It'll probably be a pump action.
Yeah, now you're talking.
Or a lever.
Finally shoot pump action. Woohoo! Would it be a 30-06 or a 270 or a 280? What would we use?
We got them in all calibers, I think.
We got them all. Don't you worry about it.
We've been
I
hoarding them.
think I'll go for the 280.
I've got one.
Cool. That sounds like fun.
Yeah.
So there was a guy. Go ahead.
No.
I had a guy come up. They got a hold of me last year, and he's a young writer, and he wrote an article. He wanted to write an article about hunting in the big woods and come and hunt with me. And his name's Matt Every. I don't know if you've heard of him. And
I don't think so.
So Field and Stream has been bought by another company, and they're going to do they're going back to a print magazine for two. They're going to do like I think it's a spring, summer, and a fall, winter one. Okay. And so that's coming out. He just notified me that, well, it must be printed because he wanted my address to get him to send me a copy. So you might want to get a copy of that Field and Stream and look things over.
Yeah, look for that.
I don't know what he wrote, but he wrote about hunting with me last fall for a week.
Okay. I'll try to find that. It'll be fun.
It'll be called, I'm sure, something about hunting in the big woods of Maine or whatever. I don't know what it is, but
Oh, I thought the title was going to be Hunting with an Incompetent Guide.
it might be. I don't know what the title is.
We love it.
You gotta watch out. You never know.
Yeah, we love it when somebody comes on the podcast and busts his balls because that don't happen very often.
Yeah, it is. It's funny that I knew we were doing this interview coming up here, and I got a copy of Sports Afield came in my mail. I think it was a promo thing. I didn't have a subscription, but I actually just sent one in just because, number one, Sports Afield is what's always got me with the Sports Afield is the quality of the publication, the glossy print and everything. It's just a nice magazine and obviously good content. But it's funny that we're talking along these lines of the magazines, and it just came, but it hit me then that there's very rarely articles. I mean, there have been in years past, but of the tradition of tracking and because it's so unique to our area and our part of the world.
Yeah, it's really, I think, probably the weakest style of hunting in the U.S. of A. anymore. People just don't track. They don't know how. If you got a fresh snow and they see a deer track, they might recognize it as a deer track, but that's about as far as it goes.
Yeah.
Whereas if you hunt in Africa, some of the trackers there. I hunted once with a bushman or what do they call them? A san, S-A-N, san bushman. Those were the local people who lived in Kalahari Desert country. And they were a South African race who they were like a part of the environment the same way as any other animal was. Just remarkable skills with primitive tools. And those guys are known as the ultimate trackers because they know how to track across sand. And to me, a track in the sand is a dimple. And they can tell you what animal did it, what species it was, whether it was a male or a female, whether it had a limp or not. Unbelievable. At any rate, a friend of mine shoots this eland, and we begin tracking it, and we find blood fairly high up on some grass. So I think, well, you got a high shoulder shot or something like that. We'll get this guy. And it petered out until it was obviously nothing but a flesh wound. He's going and going and going, but the little sand tracker stays on his tracks. And they enter a sandy area where there's another herd of oryx. Or these weren't oryx, it was eland. Another herd of eland, and I figured, well, now he's gone for good because he's mixed up with all these other tracks and they're all the same. This guy comes out of that maze of tracks following one, and he says, this is the wounded one. No blood. How did he know that? He followed that for about 4 hours and came up with it. Found that animal. Unbelievable. That's a tracker.
Yeah. Was it dead?
No, it was still alive, but it died right after we jumped it because what had happened when my friend shot for that chest shot, unbeknownst to us, the animal turned its head just enough that the bullet hit him in the jaw. and it didn't get into the chest. So this thing runs off and it beds down and it's very calmly sitting there. The blood coagulated in his throat. And when we jumped it, it must have sucked in some air and got a blood clot into its esophagus and plugged him up. So that's what killed him. He ran around some bushes and we went running over there to try to get another shot in it, and he just fell over. He died by asphyxiation.
Wow. Yeah, we have one of the guys on the team, Jeff Paradis, and he's been to Africa. He told me the same thing. He went with some of those sand trackers, and he said it was crazy. They're crazy good trackers.
Yeah, it's amazing. I hunt on one place over there, Immenhof Safaris, and their ranch, or farm they call it, has exposed rock, the bedrock, in big, big hills of it, like hundreds of yards long and stuff. And on one of them, someone has etched into the rock animal tracks, all kinds of animal tracks. And the proprietor of the ranch, who is my age, Friedrich, he said, we think this was a school for the sand for their kids. So they could say, this is what a giraffe track looks like. This is what an eland track looks like. This is what a kudu track looks like. They would remain in that rock instead of being pressed out in the sand and things. It was a lot easier for these kids to see that outline and get educated. And then they would go from there. But how fascinating is that to find a rock in which this was etched how many thousands of years ago? They've aged some of these sites over there at 30,000 years old, where they've got the pictographs and stuff like that on the rocks. Wow, that is really something to come across.
Yeah. Well, Joe's got you butted up for getting out here this fall if you want, so.
Yeah, this fall it's not going to happen. I'm booked up. I've got all kinds of adventures planned, but boy, it should be worth trying it for next year. In fact, my wife and I are planning to go see your neighbors over there, Vermont and New Hampshire, for the fall color. I've always wanted to do that, but I never wanted to give up my hunting seasons. But we're thinking, we don't have another lifetime to get this done. We better get over there because it's so beautiful up in that country.
Well, don't you know the colors in Maine are better? It just doesn't get advertised as much.
Well, I'm willing to investigate.
And there's more of it.
Yeah. Yeah, you can put New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island don't make up the size of the state of Maine.
Wow. I've been hunting off the coast for eider a couple of times, but I've never gone inland for any game in Maine.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we can have you out here next year. We'll work on that.
Yeah.
So that would be fun, guys. So I'm up for it.
We
can put it together.
All right. So come next February, you can put in for a moose permit and then start there.
And even if you don't get drawn, for a moose permit, sometimes the foliage is still pretty good for like bird season. You might be able to kill two birds with one stone, literally.
Yeah. You guys have pretty good rough grouse populations up there?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do.
And woodcock?
Yes.
Yep. Some woodcock here, not a ton of them. They mostly hug the coast. They migrate the coast more. But we have some local birds, and we'll get some little small flights come through, 20 or 30 at a time. But
well, that's more than enough for me.
yeah, well, you gotta just find those. So you hunt for the grouse, and you randomly find the woodcock in the woods while you're doing it. That's usually the way it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But yeah,
fun, guys.
We really appreciate you taking the time today, Ron, and coming on. And maybe one last time, if you want to plug your site there for people so they can check you out.
Yeah. YouTube. Just go to Ron Spomer Outdoors on YouTube, and you'll find all my gun stuff. And for the podcast, it's Ron Spomer Outdoors Podcast. And then, of course, the literally on the podcatchers. I don't know where they all appear, but all those different ways that you can listen to podcasts. I personally don't even listen to podcasts. I do watch a few on YouTube, but otherwise I'm going to be outdoors hunting. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on electronic devices.
I hear you. Well, great. Yeah, it was great having you on and informative. And we'll catch up with you somewhere. Maybe I'll see you at SHOT Show this winter.
Yeah, we'll try to hook up at the SHOT Show again, and if not that, let's just send some emails back and forth, and maybe plan that and try to get me that tag. Are there any politicians, underhanded politicians, that I can grease the skids with?
I'm sure there's some underhanded ones, but I don't know any that you can grease.
Okay, dang it.
Right.
I've never been real good at that myself, but I hear what happens.
Yeah. Hey. Well, all right then.
Great. Thank you very much, Ron.
Thanks, Ron.
We'll talk to you
Appreciate
soon.
Oh, thank you guys.
Yep. All
Good
righty.
talking to you.
You too. So, anyways, great times, and we're into hunting season here.
It's close. I see the leaves are changing quick. 40s next week.
The leaves are changing earlier than I thought they were early last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've already got foliage here on. We've already got the maples, even the sugar maples and the ridges are already turning here, which is probably 2 weeks early. So the leaves, I bet you the leaves will be down by 1st of October or something. First week of October. Yeah.
We were so dry here that a lot of our young maple leaves dried up and were brown already in the summer.
Yeah.
There wasn't enough moisture to support the darn things, and they just died.
Yeah. We had that one, I remember that one year here, it was so dry in the summer and stayed till fall. The leaves never fell off. They dried up on the trees, and they never fell off until the snows came and kind of pushed them off, But it's usually not like that
that's
here.
Sad.
Yeah.
About 3 years ago, we had a real early hard frost, and we never got the colorful leaves because it killed them.
Yeah.
They all just turned brown, and it's like you said, they turned brown and stayed on the trees for a long, long time. That was a depressing fall because we didn't have that gorgeous color. See,
Yeah.
I've got mountain maple here, which is a pretty unusual tree. It has a very small range, but we're right in the heart of it. So we get beautiful orange maple trees, and we've got 4 woodlots, 10 to 20 acres scattered on our ranch, and it is absolutely gorgeous in the fall when those things turn.
Yeah.
But
we have mountain maple here, striped maple, both like that. That's not native to too many other places, but yeah. So anyways, we'll wrap it up. As usual, support our sponsors. Hit the bell, the ding for your subscription. Subscribe to YouTube.
Yeah, and if you listen to us on iTunes, I guess they tell us that reviews are good. So
Oh, yeah.
if you like what you're listening to, give us a good review. If you don't like it, you can just move along.
All right. Well, till next time, good luck on the trail.
Hey guys, Joe here. Wanted to take a few minutes to talk about Lake Parlin Lodge. We're a 4-season lodge located just south of Jackman. We've got cabins, lodge rooms, mini lodge. We're a big snowmobile destination in the winter, full restaurant, bar, all the amenities that you need for your trip. Open obviously through the summer, right on the lake. Kayaks, canoes, all included with the cabin. We also do a lot of weddings, so if you're looking for a destination wedding, we can do a wedding up to 200 people. And of course, we've got our hunting season, moose season, deer season. So check us out. We're at lakeparlinlodge.com.
Hi everyone, team member Mark Sheeran here. Are you or someone you know struggling with a drug or alcohol problem, but you don't want to go to rehab or 12-step meetings? Well, that's exactly why we created our non-12-step Freedom Model Coaching Program. In our program, you can be coached by me and Michelle Dunbar through our in-house 2-day addiction solution workshop, or if you want to stay home, you can be coached through video conferencing on Zoom. Both options are powerful and proven effective. We've personally coached more than 27,000 people over the last 34 years. With the Freedom Model, you won't have any record of being treated for an addiction either. This is a huge benefit for those with professional licenses, or who are high profile, or simply who have a lot to lose with such a damaging label. If you're ready to change your life and solve your addiction for good, call me directly at 888-424-2626 and set up your free 30-minute coaching session today. I look forward to helping you. And here's that number again, 888-424-2626. Take care.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. Till next time, good luck on the trail.